Everybody, Bryan Alvarez here. After Dark Radio every Wednesday, 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network, as well as TuneIn Radio, YouTube, and Twitch. F4WOnline.com/YouTube, twitch.tv/F4W video. We got a lot to get into here today. It is a solo edition of the show. No guest here today, but I got a lot to talk about, and it's going to be fun. I'm going to be talking about Squatchfest, which is coming up this weekend. Squatchfest! Coming up in Kelso, Washington. If you are in the area, the weekend of January 31st, Squatchfest is going to be in Kelso/Longview, and I'll tell you about that. Ancient Aliens. I've been binge-watching, believe it or not. A lot of Ancient Aliens. My mom is a big fan, so every few days I've been going over there to watch some shows. And won't be talking about anything in particular, but do want to discuss that show because it is still on the air after all of these years. And I got a lot to say. Also going to talk about a book that I just finished reading, that I first read approximately, are you ready for this, 40 years ago? Mysteries, Monsters, and Untold Secrets by George Laycock. One of my favorite books when I was a kid. And I've read it again at the age of 50. And we're going to talk a lot about that. And then some news as well. We're going to talk about, well, phantoms. Phantom social workers. Phantom clowns. Phantom LSD tattoos. And more. And if you would like to email us today, the email bin is open right now. Bryan at AfterDarkRadioshow.com. That is Bryan at AfterDarkRadioshow.com. Send me an email on whatever you'd like to discuss, and we'll discuss it here on the air. Back in a moment with more. After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. Back in the show, Bryan Alvarez here, After Dark Radio, every Wednesday, 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern, live at 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern. You might be listening to an overnight replay. We are live every Wednesday, 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern. Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. You can listen to it on TuneIn Radio, as well as F4WOnline.com/YouTube and Twitch.tv/F4W video. And if you love the shows, but it just never works in your schedule, you can always sign up at WrestlingObserver.com. Yes, WrestlingObserver.com has the archives. Or you can grab archives on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple. Apple Podcasts, F4WOnline.com/Apple. That's F4WOnline.com/Apple. Spotify, F4WOnline.com/Spotify. And Spotify includes the audio and video. And YouTube, F4WOnline.com/YouTube. The latter three, all $9.99 per month. You get a new show every week. You get archives and plenty more. So check it out. And we are aware there are some issues on Spotify with the video. It appears to be those of you with iPhones and iPads. Seems to work fine for everybody else. But for reasons we cannot explain at this point, January 20th, the video just stopped playing. And we don't know why. It works fine for the free shows, but for the members shows, it doesn't work at all. But it works for everybody else. So we're trying to solve the problem. We're aware of it, and we're doing our best. This coming weekend is Squatchfest 2026. Are you in the Seattle area? Have I got something for you? Friday and Saturday, Kelso, Washington. Got a lot of stuff coming up both days. I'm going to try to be there for part of both days. Obviously, if you are here from the wrestling side, the Royal Rumble is Saturday, which makes things difficult. But I think I've got a plan because there's only a few things that I really need to do. One of them is Friday at 5:30. There is a VIP meet and greet with all of the speakers. And I will be there for that because I want to meet and greet all of these speakers, particularly old Cliff Barackman. For those of you that watched Finding Bigfoot, Cliff is going to be there. He's one of the speakers. And so I plan to be there for that. Friday has a Squatch calling contest, the VIP meet and greet with speakers at 5:30 p.m. There's a Tony Jones live music date night at 7, and a lot more. But Saturday is the big day. Saturday, by the way, if you have children, there is a Bigfoot Kids Cave from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. You can drop off the kids there. They got Bigfoot fun and games and crafts and such. And then there's a number of speakers, including Kathy Strain, Clyde Lewis, who is a radio host. Cliff Barackman will be from 1:45 to 2:45. I'm going to stay for that one and then probably leave to get back in time to watch the Royal Rumble. And then after that, Ben Hansen, Toby Johnson, and Alicia Pfeiffer, and Tom Reed will all be doing speeches, event speeches. Unfortunately, I don't think I can make those, which is frustrating, but such is real life. But check it out if you want to head down for any of that. It's January 30th and 31st, Squatchfest in Kelso, Washington. And if I can get the exact... Not getting paid for this, by the way. But anyway, just Google Squatchfest. You'll find it. Kelso, longviewchamber.org/Squatchfest. Or just Google Squatchfest. So, a lot of things happening there. As I mentioned before the break, my mom has been a big fan of Ancient Aliens. She loves stuff like this. Probably why I love it. And we've been going back and I go over there every couple of days and we just watch shows over and over and over again. I never really watched Ancient Aliens because, I had other things to do. But of late, I've been getting back in After Dark and the more I get into it, the more I want to know about it. And so I felt, as a professional, I need to go back and watch some of these Ancient Alien shows. And I enjoy them. I will say this. There are a lot of topics that I don't know a lot about. For example, I did this regularly After Dark up through about 2016. I think pretty much shortly after my first daughter was born, Paisley, I had to take it off the plate. There was just too much to do. Now both of these kids are independent humans for the most part, and so I can kind of get back. So I've been getting back into it, but there's a period there 2016 to 2024 where I kind of was following everything, but not a lot. So I'm out of the loop, but I need to get caught up. And so the other day, we watched the show involving all of the congressional hearings, the UAP hearings. I had a cursory knowledge of it, but I didn't know a lot about it. And so that one was interesting to me because, you heard the name David Grush, you hear this or that, but you don't really know a lot about it. So I ended up watching that one and enjoying it. But it's hard to determine on something I don't know about, well, how accurate is everything, et cetera, et cetera. So the point is, a lot of these that I watched, the thing with Ancient Aliens, if you've never watched the show, it's an easy, lighthearted show. There is stuff to learn, but at the same time, the show is called Ancient Aliens. And it is now going on, I think the first show, 2008 or something like that. This thing's been on the air for 22 seasons or something crazy. So 22 seasons, obviously it's popular, but the fact is, after one season, you've kind of run out of actual Ancient Alien stuff. Oh, maybe aliens built the pyramids, or, hey, we found this carving and it looks like a guy in a spaceship in a Mayan temple. One season, you pretty much covered everything. Well, what in God's name do you do for 23 more seasons? Well, the answer is you find a way to tie everything into UFOs. That is one of my criticisms for the show. But I do understand that if I were in charge of Ancient Aliens, I'm pretty sure the decree is, in some way, every Ancient Aliens episode needs to be tied into Ancient Aliens. But it is funny because you'll be watching these shows and, they'll have a show, can't think of an example, but just making up an example probably, the Loch Ness Monster. Okay, cool. I want to watch a show about the Loch Ness Monster. I want to know what the latest is and everything like that. But you start watching this show and it's how are they going to tie the Loch Ness Monster into aliens? Well, you logically can't, but they find a way. And that's actually one of the charms of the show. They find a way to tie. They could do a show on Oak Island, the treasure of Oak Island. Somehow, they're going to tie this into aliens. It's astounding, actually, to watch, how they get 22 seasons and probably like 300 episodes out of all sorts of different paranormal topics and somehow find a way to tie every single solitary one of them back to UFOs. My one criticism of the show, and sometimes this will kind of be addressed, is they do a lot of shows about topics that I do know about, and they have no compunction. Is that the word? They will tell a story that is absolutely not true, but they'll go with it, if that makes sense. So, for example, they'll be discussing a topic that, it's clearly been debunked, and even like people in the UFO. I think one of the examples was they were showing this video of a UFO over the Temple Mount. This was from like 2012. There's like a UFO over the temple, and it shoots up into the air. And that's pretty much widely been debunked. Even people deep into ufology, they don't. It's fake video. But in Ancient Aliens, they just use it as part of their explanation for, the temple, there may be a UFO tie-in. And look at this video from 2012. They show it, and they make no mention that, this video has been widely debunked. They just throw it in there like it's a UFO video over Temple Mount. So not a fan of that aspect of the show. But overall, it's an enjoyable watch. More after the break. After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. The show, Bryan Alvarez here, After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network, every Wednesday, 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern. TuneIn Radio, YouTube, Twitch. And we were talking about Ancient Aliens a moment ago and how my mom loves the show and probably was the reason I got into this. That brings me to this next quick topic here. This book, Mysteries, Monsters, and Untold Secrets by George Laycock, which actually I should figure out how much this thing is nowadays, because, let's see. Let's see what they're charging for this one right now. It's long been out of print. $50 on Amazon. Jeez, $54 for the hard copy. And actually, that's not even the one I got. How about that? Goodreads, what are they asking? I got this off eBay. I don't think I paid that much for it. But basically, long story short, when I was a kid, there was a library, the Kingsgate Library, and they had this exact book, Mysteries, Monsters, and Untold Secrets. And I read this book. I checked this book out over and over and over again. I loved this book. And, I grew up and everything like that. And one day I was just thinking, God, what was that book that I used to read at that Kingsgate Library? I loved that book. And so I started how do you Google it? What was that book I really liked? So I thought about it okay, it was definitely the 70s. There was definitely I remember something about monsters. And so I Googled monster books, 1970s, kids. And for a day, I'm just searching everywhere. And then all of a sudden, boom, I see the cover. And I knew it immediately. I was like, oh my God, that's the book. And so just knocked all my stuff all over. So sure enough, go to eBay, there it is. $35 or whatever, hard copy, it's out of print. And I bought it, and it got delivered, and I opened the package, and I was like, oh my God, there it is. I remember this guy, this thing right here, I don't even know what it is. For years, I thought, it looks like the Jersey Devil. You guys know about the Jersey Devil? If you've ever read about the Jersey Devil, it's an old urban legend from the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. This lady, she had, I can't remember the story. She had 10 kids, and then she had, or 12 kids, I guess it would have to be, because the 13th kid, she was she cursed this kid, and then the kid comes out winged with hooves. It's like a evil demon, and off it goes into the Pine Barrens, and that's the Jersey Devil. And for years, people in the Pine Barrens have reported seeing the alleged Jersey Devil. And if you Google the Jersey Devil, what comes up is it's like an animal with kind of spindly deer legs, and it's got big wings, and it's got a horse's head. And so, I saw this picture here on the front of the book, and I'm like, that's got to be the Jersey Devil. Well, I read the book. There's nothing in the book about the Jersey Devil. So what I think is that is supposed to be the face of the Loch Ness Monster. But I just look at it, I think it's a Jersey Devil. But anyway, I get this book, and, once you get the book that you read as a kid, you got to, find out more information about it instead of just reading it. And my first thought was, when was this book written? And it turns out this book was written in 1978. I was 3 years old. 1978. And the author is this George Laycock. And of course, a lot of the famous, people in ufology and cryptozoology, it's the same names that have gone back and they've been doing this for 50 years or whatever. Saw the name George Laycock and I'm like, who is that? Never heard of this guy before. All of these different books and websites. I never heard the name George Laycock. So then, you kind of look into the guy, and George Laycock has written more than 30 books. Are you ready for this? On natural history and conservation. Written hundreds of articles for many national magazines, Audubon, National Wildlife, Reader's Digest, and Boy's Life. When he writes of animals in the outdoors, he deals with subjects of lifelong interest. He is a native of Ohio, holds a degree in wildlife management from Ohio State University, etc., etc. So this was a guy that, I don't even think he was into the paranormal at all. On the back when it says other books by George Laycock, Animal Movers, a collection of ecological surprises, The Camels, Ships of the Desert. This is a good one. People and Other Mammals. And then, Mysteries, Monsters, and Untold Secrets. He just wrote a book randomly about 13 or 15 unresolved questions that have baffled science. And it's a pretty good book, honestly, especially for 1978. So I did want to mention, there's another Ancient Aliens tie-in. I was watching the show about Roswell, and if you are listening to this show right now, at the very least, you have heard of Roswell. And in fact, if you, person listening to this show, goes to any family member that isn't into the paranormal and asks them, what is the first thing you think when I say the word Roswell? How many aren't going to say Roswell UFO crash? It's does anybody not know at least what allegedly happened in Roswell? But what's amazing is the Roswell crash, the alleged Roswell crash, I'll say that, happened in 1947. June or July of 1947. I always thought it was early July, but I was watching Ancient Aliens, and they had a June date, and I was baffled. I was it wasn't June, it was July 8th. And I did some research, and I guess July 8th is when Mac Brazel or whoever brought the stuff in and made the call. Allegedly, it had crashed weeks earlier. So anyway, the point is, this was 1947, and as famous as the Roswell incident is, to the point where everybody has at least heard of the Roswell UFO crash, the fact is it crashed in 1947. They immediately announced it was the RAF had captured a flying disc. 24 hours later, they said, nah, it's the remains of a weather balloon. And it literally disappeared. Nobody except the hardest of the hardcore, and even the hardest of the hardcore researchers, UFO researchers, I'm pretty sure, the most they knew about it was in 1947, a balloon crashed, and they first thought it was a UFO and then found out it was a balloon. But nobody talked about the Roswell UFO crash to like the late 70s, early 80s. And I bring it up because this book was published in 1978, and it talks about UFOs and Bigfoot and Oak Island and the big birds of Texas and the Bermuda Triangle, UFOs. Not a word about Roswell. So it is amazing to read a book from 1978 that covers all of these mysteries. And here we are almost 50 years later, and most of them are still mysteries. We've got I'll just read some of the chapters here. I mean, there's a chapter on, where's the table of contents here? Loch Ness Monster, still a mystery. There's still sightings in 2026. Strange lights in the night. This is basically about the Marfa lights. We can talk about that later. UFOs. I mean, it's as big as ever in 2016. Ghost ships of the high seas. I don't think we hear so much about that nowadays, but the Bermuda Triangle, which we don't hear so much about nowadays, but I mean, it's still, I mean, to people who are into it, it's considered a mystery. I think to science, it's just, yeah, there happen to be a lot of planes crashing in a very, very large area of the sea. Big Birds of Texas, which I want to talk about. Mystery of Oak Island. We had Raven on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he's still watching a show about Oak Island in 2026. The gold that nobody can find. The Trail of Bigfoot. Where are we today compared to we were in 1978 when it comes to Bigfoot? Exact same place, just more TV shows. The Missing Virginians. Here it is, Finding Water with a Stick. We talked about dowsing on the show last week, where I happened to ask the guest, I never hear about dowsing anymore, and he goes, I douse. Oh, okay, well, I was wrong. Mysteries of a Jungle, Civilization, ESP, The Inner Mystery, Animals in ESP, and Island of the Forgotten, which is Easter Island, I believe. But, yeah, I mean, like, none of these have been answered in 50 years. They're all basically exactly as mysterious as they were back then. I want to bring up the one about the big birds of Texas, because for some reason when I was a kid, this chapter fascinated me more than any other. Probably because, you know, I was interested in UFOs and everything like that, but as a young lad, like all of us young lads, I loved dinosaurs. And so when I read this chapter about big birds of Texas, the idea that there might be like a pteranodon flying around in Texas, I was smitten. So we're going to talk about that after the break, and then we're going to get into something not talked about in the book, although it happened right around that time. Phantom clowns. Back in a moment. After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. The show, Bryan Alvarez here, After Dark Radio. Every Wednesday, 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern, live. Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. TuneIn Radio. F4WOnline.com/YouTube. Twitch.tv/F4W Video. And we were talking about pteranodons, living dinosaurs. Of course, when I was a kid, they had Mokele Mbembe, the living brontosaurus that is allegedly seen in Africa. And then, as a kid, I read this book, Mysteries, Monsters, and Untold Secrets, and it told the story of flying dinosaurs in Texas. In February 1976, a teacher at a Texas rural school had the scare of her life, it says here. While driving on a country road, she suddenly realized a gigantic flying creature was diving at her car. It cast a shadow covering the width of the road. She then saw a second flying creature, apparently the mate of the first one. How did she know that? Thoroughly shaken by her unearthly experience, the teacher drove on to the schoolhouse. She went to the library and began pulling out volumes of the encyclopedia, looking for pictures of prehistoric monsters. She examined all the pictures of dinosaurs she could find until she came to what she was certain she had seen flying over the road. Now she was more upset than ever. She was convinced she had seen a flying reptile that has been extinct for millions of years. Her school principal begged her not to tell anyone. He was worried. Students might panic. Parents would keep their children home behind closed doors. But word did get out, and 2 other teachers also reported seeing one of the winged giants that day. Just as it had with the first teacher, the beast swooped low over their cars. It was the biggest thing I've ever seen alive, one of them told a reporter. It's just unreal. I don't know how it could have survived all those millions of years and still be flying around here. It all happened so fast. It was such a shock. You think you are seeing things. It was just enormous and frightening. And it goes on from there. These were not the only reports of a mysterious winged giant loose in southern Texas at that time. This is why I love the winged eagle, by the way. There was a long list of sightings. Nobody was sure what these creatures might be. They were all known simply as Big Bird. Every day there seemed to be fresh reports arriving in the offices of the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. We were fascinated, said one state wildlife official. There were also reports from police officers. Arturo Padilla of San Benito, an experienced hunter and outdoorsman. He was driving his police car, and he saw it. Another police officer, Homer Galvin, also saw it. So, do I think there was a giant pteranodon flying around Texas? I mean, I'm skeptical. But the key to this story is 3 school teachers and 2 police officers. These weren't little kids. These weren't randos. These were teachers and police officers, upstanding citizens, that all reported seeing what appeared to be a pteranodon, pterodactyl, some sort of flying dinosaur. And it's one thing when you read the story of the Thunderbird photo. You know, these hunters shot this Thunderbird and they, put it against the wall and all stood arm in arm and posed in front of it, and everyone claims they've got the picture. That's a story from like the late 1800s. We're talking, this was 1976 that everybody in Texas was seeing these flying pteranodons. And man, I was fascinated by this as a kid. And there have been many reports of that sort of thing in the Southwest over the last 100 years. I mean, it's not a one-time deal. People see weird things. And I haven't really had a chance to really research this yet, but I'm reading another book. I forget exactly what it's called, Mysteries of the American Southwest or something. Ironically, it's by David Hatcher Childress, who was one of the talking heads in Ancient Aliens, who's actually my favorite guy. He's my favorite guy on that show, David Hatcher Childress. And he wrote a book. It actually started in like 2006 when this was before Ancient Aliens even started. David Hatcher Childress was on Art Bell. And he was on Coast to Coast AM. Actually, I think it was with George Norrie. But you can find the show on YouTube. I found it. It's actually just like finding this book. I remember this show for a decade after, and I could never find it because they only had 3 years of archives on Coast to Coast. So I ended up going on YouTube, and I found it. And David Hatcher Childress, he's telling the story of this fella in the late 1800s who allegedly discovered Egyptian artifacts in the Grand Canyon. And this was like the greatest show I'd ever heard. I loved this show. I listened to it over and over and over again. So anyway, he'd written a book in which he had written about this alleged Egyptian antiquities in the Grand Canyon, which then, of course, the Smithsonian showed up and they hauled them all away and told people don't talk about it, the whole shebang. A good old conspiracy theory from the late 1800s, which was probably completely made up. But anyway, so he'd written a book, Mysteries of the Southwest, something like that. You can find it on his website. But anyway, so he's just writing about all of these different things. And it's mostly about, hidden treasure, the Egyptian, but he's into all sorts of stuff. So every now and then, like at one point on his journey through the Southwest, he ends up in the town of Aurora. And Aurora is a town, Aurora, Texas, where allegedly a UFO crashed, I believe also in the late 1800s. There was a survivor, and the alien died, and they buried him in an unmarked... Actually, I believe it was originally a marked grave in the Aurora Cemetery, And then, over the last 20 years, the headstone vanished, and now no one knows exactly where it is. So, now, of course, you can't dig it up. But now, in the Aurora Cemetery, like, when you go, there's a giant gate, and it says Aurora Cemetery, home of the UFO allegedly flew over and crashed into a windmill, and then the guy died. But anyway, I wanted to know more about this story. But he merely mentions it in passing. He's like, I was driving through Aurora, Texas, where in 1893, a UFO allegedly hit a windmill and they buried the occupant. And then he just moves on. And I'm like, I want to know more about that. Well, anyway, he's writing about, I can't remember where exactly it was, but like, out of the blue, when talking about driving through New Mexico or some small city in New Mexico, out of the blue, he just goes, a few years ago, there were reports of a living coelophysis seen in this town. You guys know what a coelophysis is? It's a dinosaur about the size of a dog. Look it up on the internet. What a coelophysis is? It's a dinosaur, and I never heard about this in my life. A living coelophysis allegedly seen in Texas or New Mexico or wherever it was, and he moves on. So I've been, like, all day I'm trying to find, like, I'm Googling living coelophysis sighting in New Mexico. Like, where did he get this? I need to know more information. But there is no more information. But anyway, I recommend the book if you can find it somewhere, used bookstore, whatever. It's a fun book. It's just a primer. Like, if you're younger and you know about the stuff nowadays, but you don't know about the cool stuff in the 70s, there was a lot of cool stuff in the 70s when it comes to the paranormal. This is a great book to like kind of get you up to speed about the 15 biggest mysteries in the world in the year 1978. So it held up, I guess, is the best way to describe it. All right, I promised I would talk about phantom clowns, but before I do that, because it ties into phantom clowns, there was actually an article that just came out a couple of days ago. And like a true audio professional, I shut the window, so now I got to find it and open it up again. But this is not about phantom clowns, but rather about phantom social workers. That's right. This article came out, earlier this month, January 12th. But it talks about the 1990s panic over phantom social workers trying to abduct children. It says in the early 1990s, this is from boingboing.net. Boingboing.net. In the early 1990s, reports began surfacing across the UK and the United States of mysterious strangers posing as social workers, showing up at homes and attempting to examine or abduct children. Police took the reports seriously. Parents were terrified. The media ran wall-to-wall coverage. But there was just one problem. None of it was real. Between 1990 and 1994, UK police received over 250 reports of these, quote, phantom social workers. Despite extensive investigations, not a single case resulted in an actual abduction or even one confirmed sighting that could be corroborated. The pattern was always the same. Someone claiming to be a social worker would appear at a door, ask to inspect a child, leave when challenged, but actual social workers carry ID and don't make unannounced visits alone. Sociologists who study the phenomenon found it fit the pattern of a moral panic, a wave of fear spreading through a community, amplified by media coverage and feeding on itself. It is exactly the same as the story of the phantom clowns, which we have talked about here on the show. And it is just fascinating. Any of you out there, fathers, mothers, you got kids? All of a sudden they're old enough to be humans, and then they start saying things, you're like, oh my God, this is definitely my kid. My oldest daughter, Paisley, who's 9, came up to me the other day. She goes, Daddy, have you heard? In 2016, there were these clowns running around trying to abduct kids. And they say then in 2026, they're coming back. I was like, what are you watching on YouTube, first off? Second off, my God, how the world turns. In fact, in 2016, there were multiple reports of phantom clowns. And that phantom clown flap, so to speak, was very similar to another one that happened. Let's see if I can find some dates here. 2016 was the most recent it mentions here, but it literally goes back to at least 1981 was the first time that we had a phantom clown scare. And this article here from New England Folklore notes, the creepy clown phenomenon first appeared in 1981, but has happened several times since then. Many of you might remember the big nationwide clown scare of 2016. Although no one really knows why America was receptive to the idea of creepy clowns back in 1981, Lauren Coleman notes that creepy clowns, or phantom clowns as he calls them, tend to show up in election years. Every 4 years we have another one of these. Was certainly the case in 2016. And the New England Folklore website talks about how on Tuesday, May 5, 1981, the Brookline police received a report that two men dressed as clowns had approached children on Longwood Avenue near the Lawrence School. The men were driving a van, tried to entice the children into the van by offering them candy. According to the Boston Globe, the vehicle was described as an older model black van with ladders on the side, a broken front headlight, and no head hubcaps. Police called the town school department, told administrators to be extra cautious, and it was not an isolated incident. From that point, all throughout spring in the greater Boston area, one report of a phantom clown after another, and no clowns were ever found. Back with more After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. In the show, Bryan Alvarez here, After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network, TuneIn Radio, f4wonline.com/YouTube, twitch.tv/f4w video, Apple, Spotify, WrestlingObserver.com, and more. And yes, no clowns ever found. And in that particular incident, they found that most reports came from kids aged 5 to 7. And no adults saw clowns. They believed that the media hyped it up, and then adults talked about it, and then kids heard it, and then kids saw clowns. And then later that year, different areas of the country started having these phantom clown reports. And eventually it died down, and then several years later it popped up again, died down. Several years later it popped up again, died down. And most likely 2026 the clowns will come back. Or 2028, election year. But it will happen again, and the same thing the world just keeps turning. And it's not just phantom clowns. I mean, there's all sorts of mass hysterias. There was the satanic panic several years later, in which people actually were arrested. They ended up being innocent, but they were arrested. And then, of course, when I was a kid, don't have time to talk about it today, but I remember at school, we were all told about lick and stick tattoos. Don't take those lick and stick tattoos. The drug dealers lacing them with LSD. They're trying to get you kids hooked on drugs. And there was nothing to it. But such is life. We are out of time, everybody. Thank you so much for listening here today. If you love the show, sign up. Got a lot of great shows coming up. A lot of big guests. And we'll talk to you next time. After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network.